The small house at the end of Maple Street had long been the subject of ridicule. The neighbors often whispered behind closed doors, making snide comments about the house being an eyesore in their otherwise pristine neighborhood. The owner of the house, 67-year-old Thomas Kane, was a quiet and humble man. He had lived in the same house for decades, ever since his parents passed away, leaving it to him. Despite the wear and tear over the years, Thomas continued to care for the house the best he could. He worked as a janitor at the local elementary school, living off a meager salary that barely covered food and utility bills. Over the years, the once modest working-class neighborhood had gentrified. New, larger homes replaced the smaller, older ones, and property values soared. Thomas's house, however, remained the same: peeling paint, a sagging porch, and windows patched with cardboard. As the neighborhood's residents grew wealthier, they began to view Thomas's home as a blight that diminished the value of their own properties. Despite the unkind glances and whispers, Thomas remained polite, offering a friendly wave each morning as he pedaled past on his old bicycle. Even though his greetings were often met with cold silence. Though Thomas had never married and had no children, he found solace in his small garden and the few plants he could tend to in his overgrown yard. His loneliness, however, often pressed on him at night, as he sat on his porch, watching the lights come on in the surrounding houses and hearing the sounds of families laughing. It was a painful reminder of his own solitude. One particularly difficult day, after overhearing neighbors discuss how his house was ruining the street, Thomas seriously considered selling. He could move to a small apartment where he wouldn't have to face the judgment. But the thought of leaving the house that had been his home for so long, where he could still feel the echoes of happier times with his parents, was almost unbearable. Little did Thomas know, his life was about to change forever. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the rumble of a moving truck broke the calm on Maple Street. Curious neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains and fences as the truck pulled up to the house next door to Thomas's. This house, though modest by the street's standards, was still in better condition than Thomas's. A man in his mid-40s stepped out of the driver's seat. He was tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and a friendly face. He stretched, looking around, and then his eyes landed on Thomas. To Thomas's surprise, the man smiled and waved. "Good morning, neighbor," the man called out cheerfully. "I'm Alex Turner. Looks like we're going to be neighbors." Taken aback by the warm greeting, Thomas hesitated before raising his hand in a tentative wave. "Good morning," he replied softly. "I'm Thomas Kane. Welcome to Maple Street." Alex walked over to the fence separating their properties, his smile unwavering despite the stark contrast between his well-kept house and Thomas's dilapidated one. "Great to meet you, Thomas. I hope you don't mind a little noise today. Moving can be quite a production." Before Thomas could respond, a voice called from across the street. "Mr. Turner, welcome to the neighborhood." It was Carla Grant, the president of the neighborhood association, striding over with her trademark smile. "We're so glad to have you join our little community." Her smile faltered as her eyes briefly glanced at Thomas, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. "Oh, Thomas, I didn't see you there," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. Alex, however, noticed the change in Carla's demeanor and didn't miss a beat. "Thank you for the welcome, Carla. I was just getting to know my new neighbor here," he said, turning back to Thomas with a warm expression. Carla's smile tightened, and she quickly changed the subject. "Well, there are plenty of other neighbors you should meet. Why don't you come to our neighborhood barbecue next weekend? It'll be a great opportunity to get to know everyone." She pointedly did not extend the invitation to Thomas. Alex raised an eyebrow but kept his friendly demeanor. "That sounds lovely. Will you be there, Thomas?" Before Thomas could mumble his usual excuse, Carla interjected with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, Thomas doesn't usually attend our gatherings. He's quite busy," she said, turning away without waiting for a response. Feeling the sting of the interaction, Thomas retreated to his porch, watching Alex continue to unload his truck. As the day went on, it became clear that Alex was quickly becoming popular with the neighbors. He was greeted with welcome baskets and offers of help, things that Thomas hadn't experienced in years. Later that afternoon, as Thomas was tending to his small vegetable patch, one of his few sources of pride, he heard Alex's voice call out to him. "Hey, Thomas, got a minute?" Thomas straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. Of course. Alex, what can I do for you? Alex leaned over the fence, his warm smile never fading. First off, it's just Alex. Mr. Turner makes me feel old. Secondly, I was wondering if you could help me out. I'm trying to set up my Wi-Fi router, but I'm absolutely useless with technology. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Thomas blinked in surprise. It had been years since a neighbor had asked him for help with anything. I'm not sure I'd be much help, he admitted. I don't even own a computer. Alex's smile didn't falter. No worries. How about this? Why don't you come over for dinner tonight as a thank you for being such a welcoming neighbor? I make a mean stir-fry. Thomas was stunned. He couldn't remember the last time someone had invited him over for dinner. Oh, I wouldn't want to impose. He started, but Alex waved off his protest. Nonsense. It's just me, and I always make too much food anyway. Please, I insist. How about 7 o'clock? Thomas hesitated, then nodded, feeling a spark of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. That's very kind of you, Alex. Thank you. As Thomas walked back to his house, a mix of emotions swirled within him: excitement about the prospect of company, anxiety about how to act, and hope that perhaps things on Maple Street were about to change. What Thomas didn't know was that this simple dinner invitation was the first step in a journey that would not only transform his life but also change the lives of everyone on Maple Street. The evening of the dinner, Thomas stood at Alex's front door, holding a small potted tomato plant as a hostess gift. The smell of garlic and ginger wafted from inside. When Alex opened the door with a warm smile, he accepted the gift. Oh, is this from your garden? That's wonderful. I noticed you have quite the green thumb, he said, as Thomas stepped into Alex's home. He was struck by how warm and inviting it felt. Despite being sparsely furnished due to the recent move, Alex led him to the kitchen, where a variety of dishes were spread out, ready for the meal. I hope you like Chinese food, Alex said, stirring something in the wok. It's my grandmother's recipe. Thomas, still overwhelmed, nodded. It smells delicious, he managed to say, and as the evening went on, he found himself relaxing and opening up. The conversation was easy, and they talked about everything from Alex's move to Maple Street to Thomas's job at the elementary school. As they shared a delicious meal, Alex's questions became more personal. So, Thomas, you mentioned you work at the elementary school. What's that like? Thomas's eyes lit up. It's wonderful. Really. The children don't judge. They're just happy to see a friendly face. Sometimes, it feels like they're the only ones who really see me. Alex nodded thoughtfully. I can imagine. It must be hard feeling invisible in your own neighborhood. Thomas paused, surprised by how perceptive Alex was. You noticed that? He asked. Alex's expression was kind. It's hard not to notice. Thomas, the way some of the neighbors treat you. It's not right, but you know what I see? I see a man who, despite everything, still greets everyone with a smile. That takes a special kind of strength. Overwhelmed by Alex's kindness, Thomas felt a lump form in his throat. No one had spoken to him like this in years. As the evening continued, Alex made a proposition. I'm an architect by trade, he said, specializing in home renovation. What would you say to us working together to fix up your house? Thomas's eyes widened. I couldn't possibly afford it, he protested. Alex held up his hand with a smile. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about a partnership. I provide the know-how and some materials. You provide the labor and your green thumb for my neglected backyard. What do you say? Thomas was speechless. The idea of his house being restored to its former glory felt like an impossible dream. But why would you do this for me? He asked. Alex's expression softened. Because that's what neighbors do. Thomas, we help each other. And frankly, I could use a friend in this new neighborhood, someone real. Not just someone putting on airs for the newcomer. As the year passed, the house that had once stood as a symbol of poverty and isolation became a beacon of community and hope. The neighborhood, once fragmented by division and prejudice, had been unified by Thomas and Alex's kindness and hard work. The house on Maple Street was no longer just a physical structure. It was a testament to the power of compassion and the transformative nature of kindness. What had started as one man's act of neighborly goodwill had grown into a community-wide movement that brought the residents of Maple Street closer together than ever before. And as the final touches were put on Thomas's home, he realized that it wasn't just about the house. It was about the people who had come together to create a home, not just for Thomas, but for everyone. The community had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that the true wealth of a neighborhood lies in its people, the kindness, the connections, and the willingness to stand together in the face of adversity. As Thomas stood in his beautifully restored home, surrounded by his neighbors, he knew that he had finally found the sense of belonging he had longed for all those years. It was the richest house on Maple Street, not because of the property value, but because of the love, support, and the sense of community it represented. And in the end, that was more valuable than anything else.